Hello all. I will tell you 2 horror stories today. Enjoy watching. In the shadow of a nightmare, a young boy named John, a few weeks ago, watched a horror movie that led him to a series of nightmares he would never forget. The movie, titled Darkness on the Surface, had a gloomy atmosphere. It featured a terrifying creature that stalked people at night, doing horrific things to them. At first, John only felt a slight influence from the film, but after a while, he began to notice that the line between reality and the film was slowly blurring. John had never had such terrifying dreams before. The previous nights had been filled with only a couple of nightmares. But one night, when he woke up, his heart was pounding so fast that he could barely breathe. In his dream, the terrifying creature from the film had entered his home. It was silently lurking in a dark corner, its eyes following every movement John made. John tried to wake up, but his body was paralyzed, as if this creature had trapped him both in the dream and in reality. In that moment, terrified that his nightmare was becoming real, he jumped out of bed. But this nightmare was just the beginning. John's nightmare grows more real. After the first nightmare, John started seeing the same one every night. The creature would get closer with each passing night, becoming more and more menacing. John would wake up trembling, filled with fear. At first, his family thought he was just affected by the movie and that he would eventually forget about it. But as time went on, John's behavior became stranger. He would toss and turn in bed at night, muttering the things he saw in his dreams aloud. His parents, unable to notice the constant fear their son was living with, still didn't believe him. John tried to warn them about the filmed reality, but no one listened. One night, the creature appeared in John's dream more vividly than ever before. This time, it wasn't just a figure. It truly seemed like it was stalking him. In his dream, the creature climbed up to his window, shattered the glass, and entered his room. John screamed in terror, but no one could hear him. The creature approached him and said, "I'll follow you forever." John telling about his sleepless night. The next morning, John woke up feeling exhausted. His eyes were red, and he was more tired than ever. He hadn't been able to sleep because of the fear the creature brought every night. Over breakfast, he decided to finally tell his family what was going on, but he didn't know how to explain it. "Mom, Dad, please come with me. I need to show you something," he said, his voice trembling. His parents replied, "What is it, son? Did you watch that scary movie again?" "No," John said. "That creature, the one from the movie, it's haunting me. It comes at night, breaks my window, and watches me. It's playing with me." His parents couldn't believe what he was saying, but they thought his fears were just a kind of phobia triggered by the movie. They tried to comfort him, saying, "It will pass, son. It's just a nightmare. You'll forget it as you get older." However, John wanted to say something, to show them the truth in his eyes, but no words came out. After all, no one believed him. Fighting the nightmare. A week later, John's nightmares grew even worse. The creature grew closer every night, becoming even more cruel. John wasn't just terrified in his dreams. He began to feel fear during the day as well. He felt like something was watching him, following him at all times. The line between reality and fantasy was becoming increasingly blurry. One night, unable to bear any longer, John decided to take action. He had to stop the creature, do something to fight back. He needed to make himself stronger. First, he decided to learn more about the creature. He researched online, looking into old legends and mystical books. Eventually, he found a reference in an ancient manuscript about a similar creature. A shadowy being that follows the night, slowly taking control of the person's mind, wrapping them in both nightmares and real fears. But if the person fights back with true courage, the being will disappear and peace will return. This gave John hope. In that moment, he decided that he was the only one who could fight this creature, face to face with the creature. One night, as usual, the creature entered John's dream. But this time, John didn't respond with fear. He decided to confront it with determination. The creature climbed up to the window once again, entered his room, and said, "I will follow you forever." But this time, John replied courageously, "No, I'll send you away. I'm not afraid anymore." The creature laughed and said, "You can't do that." But John found the courage within himself and took a step forward. At that moment, the creature tried to take his soul, but John screamed and, with all his strength, pushed it away. The creature recoiled, and the atmosphere around John suddenly shifted. The darkness that had surrounded him lifted, and the light returned, back to peaceful sleep. From that moment on, the creature never appeared in John's dreams again. For the first time in years, John fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, spending the night in tranquility. When he woke up the next morning, he felt refreshed and rejuvenated. His parents were amazed when they saw him. Their son had finally returned to normal after such a long time. John had finally conquered the creature he had seen in his nightmares, and he was able to live his life in peace once again. No longer would horror movies or creatures affect him. The nightmares he once had were now just a memory, left behind in the past.
Now I will tell you a story I lived. Enjoy watching. In the shadow of the nightmare. On September 13th, Clara's life changed during a flight, marking a turning point in her journey. Struggling with a fear of heights and schizophrenia, she fought every day, silently enduring the storm inside her. Her doctors told her, "You need to learn to control your fears." But for Clara, reality often blurred into a strange simulation. It felt as though the thin line between her world and the one around her was slowly disappearing. That day, she boarded a plane for a business trip. Despite her fear, she didn't know that this flight would bring something into her life she had never encountered before. Reality seemed to slip away with every passing second. The start of the flight. The plane took off and Clara looked out the window. The world below seemed to shrink, becoming like a tiny map. That moment something felt off. The inside of the plane seemed to darken. Other passengers continued chatting, reading newspapers, oblivious to her growing unease. But for Clara, everything was becoming increasingly strange. Her vision was blurring, sounds were distorting, and everything seemed to be viewed through a glass box. She pressed her head against the window and closed her eyes. She tried to push her fear aside, but with every breath she took, she felt something was missing. Screams echoed in her head. "The height will kill you." Clara opened her eyes for a moment and noticed all the passengers were staring at her. Slowly, her terror grew. She thought the plane was going to throw her out. "No, it's just a hallucination," she told herself. But when she glanced outside the window again, she saw something. Something far off but definitely real. Not outside the plane but in the sky. It was as though the sky had turned dark, but not in the usual way. It was like a black ocean with moving red lights. And those lights were following the plane. The disruption of reality. Clara took a deep breath, her heart racing. She closed her eyes again, but something had changed inside the plane. The passengers were silent now. A strange silence. Then, a whispering sound came from behind her. She slowly turned her head. A woman wearing an old-fashioned dress, with eyes full of blood, was staring at her. Clara recoiled, quickly turning away. But when she turned back, there was something there. Behind her. Figure. Slowly, it moved toward her, its eyes full of fear. "You see us, don't you?" the figure said. Its voice was a deep, hollow echo in her ears. Clara took a step back, but her body wouldn't move. "We've been waiting for someone like you." The figure smiled at Clara, but it wasn't a human smile. It was a smile born from fear. Suddenly, the plane shook violently. The windows rattled, the lights flickered. A lightning strike illuminated everything, and in that moment, Clara felt reality completely vanish. The takeover by demonic entities. The plane suddenly plunged into a deep drop. The passengers screamed, but Clara wanted to believe it was just a nightmare. But there was something. On the walls near the windows, those entities had taken place. Their eyes were red, and their bodies were far from human. Clara dared to look outside the plane. The sky had darkened, and in the distance, demonic figures began to appear, cloaked in black mist. At that moment, Clara's mind snapped. Reality was completely gone. The passengers had transformed into demonic figures. Their faces were misshapen. Their eyes were empty voids. Each of them was moving toward her. "You brought us here," they said. "Our time has come." Clara was suffocating in the boundaries of her schizophrenia. The demonic entities surrounded her, their voices echoing in her mind. In that moment, Clara realized something. She had to fight back. With a scream, she grabbed onto the armrest of her seat and stood up. Everything was attacking her. Everything was trying to destroy her. A battle in the dark. As the plane shook violently, Clara decided to fight back with all her might. She knew that instead of hearing the voices of fear brought on by her schizophrenia, she had to show resistance. That moment, everything changed. Slowly, she stood up, and everything around her, the plane, the entities, became shadows. The final barrier inside Clara's mind broke, transforming her into a warrior against fear. Each movement she made resonated like an explosion as she struck the dark entities, pushing them away. With each attack, she grew stronger. One entity approached her, shouting, "You're going to play with us." But Clara, gathering all her strength, leaped at it and gripped its throat. Finally, the creature vanished. However, not everything was over. Clara, looking outside the window again, saw the sky filled with those demonic figures and dark entities surrounding her. Her eyes filled with blood, but she had survived. The aftermath. Suddenly, everything went silent. Clara took a deep breath. The demonic entities were gone. The plane had returned to normal, and peace had returned to the sky. But Clara's spirit had been shattered by the terrifying battle she had just fought. When the plane finally landed, Clara was taken to the hospital. Physically, she was fine, but her soul had fought too hard to stay alive. And Clara, after that terrifying journey, withdrew into the deepest corners of her schizophrenia. She now only knew one thing. In a world where fear is real, when the battle ends, only the survivor remains. That was our story for today. Thanks for listening. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.